Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Crane. You can follow my content at legendaryupside.com. With me today is Nick Guarisco. Nick is one of the most accurate mock draft predictors of round one. This is something he's actually, proven accuracy looking at, mock draft contests. So we've got Nick on today to talk through round one of the draft and predict where these players are actually going to land. Nick, how's it going?
It's great, Pat. Thanks for having me on. I've seen your name a number of times, ETR in the DFS space. So it's an honor to be here. Appreciate you having me on today.
Do you want to give people a little background on kind of your expertise here with the mock draft predictions?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been playing fantasy football for about 20 years. And I kind of just, I love fantasy football, but I kind of just found this niche in terms of it takes a couple to see if you're good at it. I started tracking my mock drafts about a decade ago. Actually, I think 12 years now. And then once you see that you're pretty good at predicting it, you start kind of entering those contests and competitions. There's a number of different accuracy grading sites. And in the last 6 years, you said it, my mocks have been some of the most accurate in the world. It's something I take a lot of pride in. And it's also something like, it's really honestly become a passion of mine. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And again, I really appreciate you having me on, just kind of talk NFL draft, mocking, strategy, everything like that.
Yeah. So Daniel Raz is someone that I trust a lot on the draft, and he trusts you a lot. So that's where this connection kind of came. So I wanted to, let's go ahead and just dive into the NFL draft, and starting at the top. Cam Ward is looking like he's going to be the Tennessee Titans quarterback. I think he's looking like a lock to go number one. Like, the only way that he wouldn't be the Titans is if someone blew them away with a trade. That would be my read on it. Is that the way you're viewing it?
Yeah, that's the way I'm viewing it as well. Earlier on in the process, I thought it was more feasible or realistic, I guess, that a team could come in and, I guess, blow them away with an offer. There's a lot of rumors that the Giants really liked Cam Ward, but I think that the Titans may have been open to it. My speculation, one reason that I think that they're less open to it now, is not that they've fallen in love with Ward. I think they've already kind of known who Ward was as a prospect, and that's kind of been thrown around by a lot of big media pundits there. It's like, oh, now they've fallen in love with Ward. I actually think they really wanted to take Abdul Carter. And it might be kind of a hot take, but I think once they figured out they ran the medicals on him and they figured out that he's more of a risk there medically, then at that point I think they started kind of pivoting toward Ward. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I do think that Carter was the initial inclination there for Tennessee. And now we're going to see Cam Ward go there. They have to compete in a tough AFC with a ton of really good quarterbacks. And I think Ward's probably their best chance of doing so. So this is, as far as we're concerned, mocking the draft, betting the draft, this is pretty much as locked as it gets for like at this point right now.
So the Abdul Carter medicals, the buzz now is that the Browns are looking at Travis Hunter at number 2. I saw something today that maybe they were thinking Sheduer, but it seems like Hunter's most likely there. Do you think the Abdul Carter medicals are the reason why that he might not even be the second pick now?
I don't think the medicals are so bad to where it's like, okay, because in round one, you have medicals that are taking players off of round one boards. I've heard and read articles about teams that medicals can take them off of the board as a whole and character concerns alike. However, I don't think Carter's medicals are as bad as like, oh, we're dropping him down 15 spots or anything. But I do think teams may use it, even if it's a temporary thing, as kind of a tiebreaker of sorts.
Right.
But to me, I really do buy into the Browns wanting Travis Hunter there. I think the lowest Carter is going to fall is pick 4 to the Patriots. I have a hard time believing that Mike Vrabel and the Patriots would pass on Abdul Carter, considering his upside.
So paint that scenario for me, that the Patriots actually get Abdul Carter. Is that the Giants or the Browns taking Sheduer at 2 or 3?
I think it's more likely that the Giants are taking Sheduer. I know there's a lot of talk, and like you mentioned, I saw the report today. I think it was Schultz or someone was saying that, oh, well, the Browns are still considering Sanders. maybe I could see them moving back up into round 1 and taking Sanders if he were to slide. And a lot of people are projecting him to slide. I do think there's genuine interest there in Cleveland, especially if they end up adding Travis Hunter with the second pick, kind of going for that pair. However, the team that's been reported over and over again by Brugler and others that have done the most homework on Sanders is the New York Giants. And there is a scenario where the Giants, despite Russ Wilson, despite Jameis Winston, take Sanders at 3. Again, I think it's less likely now. I have the draft just like a lot of mock pundits have the draft right now, which is Ward, Hunter, and then Carter going to the Giants at 3. In fact, the Giants I believe they're hosting Carter right now on their top 30 meeting, like as we speak today. So according to Schefter, at least. So now it kind of opens up a pivot point at New England here. But if the Giants were to take Sanders, like you suggest could happen, I don't think Carter's getting past New England.
Yeah, I feel like if going on 37-year-old Russell Wilson is enough of a reason for you to not take a guy at 3, then you shouldn't be taking that guy at 3 under any circumstances. But I mean, the Giants, it seems like Sheduer's stock has really cooled since, or at least the perception of the stock, where we sit has cooled since the end of the college season, where it was like, is he the quarterback 1 in the class, or is Ward the quarterback 1? It's like Ward's the quarterback 1, and now Sheduer's maybe not a top 3 pick. Would you what do you view kind of the chalk right now? Would it be Ward, Hunter, Carter?
That is the chalk right now, and a lot of mock drafters, myself, and then a lot of other experts, even big name experts like Jeremiah McShay, are moving in that direction. It seems like so. That's the chalk right now at 1, 2, and 3, and it really opens up a really, really wide range of where Sanders could end up here. But like you suggested, when we started this process, and I kind of start this process in February of kind of laying out the mock and trying to read scouting reports on these guys and stuff. When we started, it seemed to be, like you said, Sanders and Ward were the top quarterbacks. Then big analysts started reporting that, hey, there's actually a gap after Ward. And now it's even gotten so far to where, hey, actually these teams are viewing Sanders not necessarily as QB2. Some teams may have Milroe as QB2. Some teams may have Dart as QB2. So now it's kind of like Ward and then a gap. And Sanders is probably QB2 for most teams, from what I understand. But there are some teams, as McShay reported, that have Dart higher than Sanders on their board. And it sounds like, based on Milroe's invite to the draft, it sounds like definitely some teams have a first-round grade on Milroe. I would imagine stylistically, because they're so different, depending on what teams want, I would imagine that teams also have some teams, not the majority of teams, some teams have higher grade on Milroe than Sanders as well.
Wow. What do you make of that invite with Jalen Milroe both getting invited and accepting the invite to the draft? There's been no buzz prior to that on him going round 1. I was assuming he'd go round 3. I'm like, I still think he's in for a rough night on night 1 of the draft. But what do you make of that?
He could be. It's no lock that he's going to go in round 1 now just because they invited him. But I do make something out of it. I think it would be not prudent to just kind of ignore it like, oh, well, I'm just going to stick with my priors. I think the NFL inviting him after Jordan Schultz's report that they're only going to limit the invites here to, I think it was 8 to 10 people, they said. I think it's going to end up being more like 15, but maybe 8 to 15 attendees here. That tells you right there. It doesn't tell you that he's going in the top 15 picks. It doesn't even tell you that he's going in the first round. I think what I interpret that after years and years of following this process, what I interpret is that it tells you that some teams have a first round grade on Jalen Milroe. And so at this point, from a mocking perspective, you're kind of speculating which teams that might be. I tweeted about it. My first instinct was the Steelers. They met with him. The Steelers are pretty transparent and very kind of candid about
They kind of are, aren't they?
Yeah. So
it's just telegraphed the Najee pick and the Pickett pick, I feel like.
They did. The one thing they did show a lot of interest in Malik Willis at that time too. So the Pickett was a
Right.
little bit
Okay.
more of a surprise, but yeah, the Najee pick was just the classic, like, hey, we're going to take him. No one's really going to do anything about it. And that's very rare. That's like, it's atypical.
Yeah, because it's not very smart to do that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a game where other people can take the guy you want,
So Tomlin has been notorious for going to pro days. Like he picks players where he's traveled to their pro days. He's one of the best coaches at doing that, like actually getting on the plane, going to these pro days, having dinner with these guys. The GM has had dinner with Milroe. So Colin Cowherd, of all people, who I know a lot of people discredit because, sensationalism and stuff like that with Cowherd. And sometimes he's just going for clicks or whatever it is. But I like throughout this process, I'm always just trying to, not everything's taken with a grain of salt. You're kind of just sifting out the BS, the smoke screens, or what seems legitimate. When Cowherd was so emphatic that, hey, this is going to be pick 21 with the Steelers, and he gave this argument that the Steelers cannot compete in the AFC unless they have a dual threat at quarterback. And, you kind of think about Arthur Smith's offense and quarterbacks he has had in the past, right? And you think about how run first it is. And you also think about how the Steelers don't have a second round pick and their interest, showing their interest. Things are kind of lining up that the Steelers could be one of these teams with a first round grade on Milroe. The other teams that came to mind were the Jets because of the Rich Cimini report, which actually happened a day before this Brugler bomb, I called it, of the Jalen Milroe invite situation. Cimini's report on the Jets was that Aaron Glenn prioritizes mobility in quarterbacks, and that's why he brought in Justin Fields, and they're going to actually work the offense around Justin Fields' mobility. And one of the comps I'm seeing in the scouting community from Jalen Milroe is Justin Fields. So I think the Jets may be moving back in the round one is a possibility, and the other team is the Giants. I think this is more of a stretch, but maybe they see Josh Allen in it, but it's not so much that they see Josh Allen as it is the Giants are absolutely desperate. And if they don't love Sanders at 3, or they think that they view Sanders or Milroe equally, then why not take a guy at 3, like a Pro Bowl player in Carter or Hunter, and then try to move back up with our early round pick, back into round 1 where Milroe is more likely to go, which is in the 20s. The dark horse team, I would say, is the Saints. Those are kind of the 4 teams I'm kind of eyeing there. The Browns, not the Browns, the Giants, the Jets, the Steelers, and the Saints. You got the Kellen Moore situation, and he saw Hurts win a Super Bowl. This kind of happened with Hurts, right? When Hurts was picked, he wasn't considered a huge need. In fact, it was a very controversial pick at the time. He went in the second round because they already had a starter. Maybe that since the Saints already have Carr, maybe, hey, let Carr play for 1 year. Milroe is more of a project. Maybe Milroe is a quarterback of the future. But again, I don't see it at 9. I see it more like let's trade back into the 20s to get him.
Well, I've been actually wondering if maybe the Saints would take Sanders at 9, because you kind of got the same thing where it's like, because Sanders is an interesting prospect where the upside is that he's really, he's very accurate. He can execute an offense, and you're kind of having him as that like point guard, maybe in kind of the Brock Purdy mold, and you're getting really efficient play out of him, even though, he doesn't have like the perfect big time NFL skill set, but he does take a lot of sacks, and you do worry about kind of how he's going to handle pressure at the NFL. So I wouldn't be shocked if a team, like the Saints was like, we're not going to really start him this year, and actually be in a position to not do that. I mean, they are tied to Carr this year. They could get out next year. So he would give them an exit plan and a team that is like really in cap hell. He would provide kind of a light at the end of the tunnel there. So whether it's Sanders at 9, or maybe even another quarterback at 9, or kind of trading back in to the end of the first and grabbing one of these guys, how interested do you think the Saints would be in a quarterback?
I think at this point, it's more likely they're going to trade back into the first if they want a quarterback. I agree with you, Pat, that the Saints are set up to kind of take a developmental quarterback right now. And it's a decent situation. They have Juwan Johnson, they have Olave, Rashichi. They play in a dome. It's a decent situation, seeing as Carr can kind of play this year and then leave. it sets up for a quarterback. I don't think it's going to be at 9. I thought about it for a long time. Obviously, I think about it every day. I think about the draft every day, of course. But I kind of sat with it for a little bit, and I'm actually in New Orleans, so it's kind of the local team. So this is all the buzz right now, surrounded by, hey, are the Saints going to take Sanders? It doesn't seem like something the Saints would do at pick 9. I'm not saying that they're not interested in Sanders, but the Saints, first of all, under Loomis, typically draft for upside. Whether it's defensive line, offensive line, they're typically drafting major athletes with upside. That's kind of been their MO. I don't think Sanders is viewed by most teams as a player with huge upside. I'm seeing a lot of Teddy Bridgewater comparisons. I'm seeing a lot of golf comparisons. To me, Sanders fits more with a team where you mentioned Purdy. I love that because I think he kind of fits in that kind of Shanahan Kubiak system really well. And that's why I think the Browns might be really interested with the Stefanski and that kind of stuff there. I think he fits more in that, but it would not surprise me if Dart, Milroe, or Sanders is falling to the 20. The Saints have known to be very, very aggressive with kind of not only their draft, but also their salary cap, as you suggested. They're just a very aggressive franchise here under Loomis, and they kind of do what it takes. And the Saints fans, I got to tell you, they're all over here, and Who Dat Nation is really sick of Carr. I have to say, I mean, they are ready for the next step. And I think that's part of the pressure here. But do they want to force it? They never really get to pick in the top 10, Pat. I mean, the Saints, they've been kind of mid, as my freshman students would say, for a while since Breeze, but they haven't had a top 10 pick. And Underhill seemed to suggest, and he's such a reliable Saints beat writer, he seemed to suggest that the Saints are kind of using that as, hey, we need to get a blue chip player in the top 10.
Okay.
And if Underhill's not on Sanders to the Saints, I don't think I can be as a mocker either, because, I have a document where I just kind of have, I kind of have beat writers that I like and that I trust and that I follow. And Underhill for the Saints is ranks near the top of that list in terms of reliability. What he says matters. And he doesn't seem to be on the Sanders. He's not going to come out and say the Saints are not interested in Sanders. He's not that type of reporter, but he doesn't seem to suggest that it fits their what they typically do in the draft. So if he's not on it, I just don't think from a mocking standpoint I can be on it either. But I do see why the Vegas over-under is there. I mean, I see why it's 9.5. I get it. I get it. Even Dion suggested that he would like to play in New Orleans, or Sanders would like to play in New Orleans. But I'm just not quite there. I think the Saints are going to try to get a blue chip player, Tyler Warren, Kelvin Banks, that kind of player.
Okay, so if Sheduer doesn't go top 3, and the Saints aren't all that interested at 9, and the Jets aren't necessarily that interested in that type of profile at 7, the Raiders just signed Geno and traded for him, so they don't seem like very likely to take him at 6. I'm going to add this from Tankathon here so that we can look at the draft order. We're now looking at Chicago, the 49ers, the Cowboys. These teams are not likely to take a quarterback. So Sheduer is still on the board, assuming no trades. We get to kind of the teams in the teens here. Adam Schefter was on. There was a clip going around where he was kind of throwing out teams that aren't typically tied to Sheduer Sanders. He suggested, if we're he wasn't saying this is going to happen, but basically let's think outside the box. Who are some teams that we could maybe add to the conversation? He suggested Miami at 13, Arizona at 16, which kind of shocked me, especially given the contract situation. They're kind of tied to Kyler through the end of next year at least. And then the Rams at 26. Thoughts on those destinations?
I currently have a mock to the Rams, so that's the one I'm going to have to go with right now. I know the most popular mock spot right now is Pittsburgh at 21. And while I do think they'll probably take a quarterback there, although I'm really actually not sold on that as maybe other people are, I actually think Derek Harmon's really in play there. And I also think Hampton, if Denver passes on him, is in play. But if it's not Hampton or Harmon, it's probably going to be a quarterback in Pittsburgh, from what I understand. I've also heard they like Matthew Golden. So, yeah, there's a couple players there. But the point is, I don't know if a lot of people are just mocking it in a way where, if Sanders falls to 21, Pittsburgh's got to take him. They need a quarterback. I don't necessarily see him as a great fit in Arthur Smith. And I'm not grinding the tape. I'm not a film junkie or anything like that. But I also just don't know if I see him as a fit with Tomlin. And maybe Tomlin and Dion are best friends, and I'm mistaken. But I think there's kind of a reason that we haven't seen a lot of Sanders to Pittsburgh buzz. We've just seen it mocked a lot because I think it's kind of a natural kind of fall point, or a destination from a fall. I think the Rams are actually more logical, though. We have a situation where Stafford is a veteran. Nobody's questioning Stafford's starting this year.
Right.
So you're not getting into any controversies there. I think Stafford's deal is more in essence of a 2-year deal. And Stafford's just really old. And he's also had injury history. But
I think they could even get out after this year based on I'm not sure we have the final contract details, but it looked like from what people expected, they would be able to move on.
About the Stafford, the Rams destination is that you have McVay, which is a young creative. We mentioned that he needs to be in a system where accuracy is kind of prioritized. Yeah. McVay's offense is run currently with an immobile quarterback, which Sanders kind of is. And also great weapons. Devontae Adams, Puka, Devontae Adams. And, they might end up drafting another receiver or a tight end there. As Jordan Rodriguez says, it's like priority A for the Rams, honestly. It's to get another tight end receiver. So, yeah, it's just a nice point for Sanders. Now, is he going to last all the way to 26, though? I kind of doubt it. But from a mocking standpoint, you do have to take a stand at some point. And the Rams were kind of a popular spot for Jackson Dart. So if Jackson Dart and Sheduer are both on the board, I'm kind of going to lean in Sanders' perspective. So I like that Ram fit way more than I like Schefter's kind of off, admittedly kind of off the wall suggestions of Miami and Arizona. I actually think Dallas would even be almost even more likely than those two. But that's very...
That would be so weird and frustrating. It would be weird. But I don't disagree with you. I could see them doing it. During the Matthew Stafford saga, I'd heard that they actually were kind of into Jimmy Garoppolo. And I feel like if you can get yourself to be into Jimmy Garoppolo, then you're a good fit for Sheduer Sanders.
I think that was a negotiating ploy, but nobody was really buying it, though. But yeah, I do agree, like conceptually, if McVay can make something work with Garoppolo, then I think Sanders would fit.
If you're willing to publicly put out there that you're into Jimmy Garoppolo, then Sheduer Sanders might work. Okay, so as you're describing the possibility of Sheduer maybe falling to the Rams, how many quarterbacks are off the board at that point? Like, if that were to come to pass, are we talking about him as quarterback 4? Is Dart in this conversation, or you're thinking maybe Milroe comes off as quarterback 2, Dart and Sheduer on the board, and the Rams were to take Sheduer there? Like, what are we talking about to where Sheduer is actually falling to 26?
Milroe seems like his ceiling is 21 to Pittsburgh because there's no interest there, or at least perceived interest there. Milroe to me is somebody, if he goes in round 1, and if it's not to Pittsburgh, it's probably a trade back into round 1, like at the very end, tail end of the draft. Sanders, if he slides, I think that's also, it's more of a 20 situation. The problem, Pat, is that the numbers, the demand just isn't there for quarterbacks. We know it's not a great quarterback class. So in order for a team to actually move up and trade assets to get a quarterback, or to take one in this class in general, they really need a quarterback. They need one. And you see a lot of teams that maybe could use a quarterback in the future. Maybe if you want to throw Arizona or Miami in there, I don't really agree with that, but you don't see a lot of teams that need one. Pittsburgh needs one. The Giants need one. The Browns need one. And that is, that's kind of it. So at this point, you're looking at teams, most of those teams, except for Pittsburgh, don't pick in round 1, or they pick very earlier in round 1. So you're looking at a trade back into the draft. And that's honestly, a mock drafter like me, it's honestly the worst nightmare. It really is, because you just can't, it's extremely unpredictable. The draft's already unpredictable. It's extremely unpredictable to predict trades. And if you predict a trade that goes wrong, you kind of miss out on getting any accuracy points or a team match or anything with that slot that you did. I typically never try to do mock trades, and I made an exception last year, and I really, it's like my biggest regret. It cost me 2 picks making that, like 2 correct matches, just because I mocked a trade. And like, that was something I was adamant against.
What trade did you mock?
I mocked, it was a very commonly mocked trade. I think even big mockers are known guys like Jeremiah. It was mocking the Chargers and the Vikings to swap picks. The Vikings taking JJ McCarthy, but then the Chargers would have to move down to 11, I believe it was, or maybe 12, I think it was. And at that point, they were going to select Latham. And the reason why it cost me picks is because you end up getting McCarthy right, but there's no way that, like, there was a lot of Latham to the Chargers noise on draft day last year. It was kind of a last second thing, but there's no way that if I would have kept the Chargers at 5, that I would have put Latham at 5 over Alt. Right. The trade was kind of like hey, if I'm undecided, that could be like a tiebreaker. A lot of big analysts are mocking this. We know McCarthy's going to go a little earlier than 12, so let's do this trade. And gosh, I mean, you can look at my mock history on fantasylogger.com. I mean, I almost never, ever mock trades. And I'm kind of like, now I'm even more against it than I was when I did it last year. I really regretted it. Like, it was, and I also think, I don't know, there's part of me that thinks you should just kind of, every mocker, when they're entering these contests, it should just be kind of a clean slate. Just stick to the picks and go with that. I think you can kind of not rig the system, but cheat the mocking grading system a little bit by doing that. For example, if you're unsure if the Browns are going to take Sanders or Hunter at 2, well, what you could do, and it's between those 2 players, what you could do is you could have them take Hunter and then just mock a trade of Sanders back up at pick 30. The Browns move back in, and then you automatically get a hit for that pick. So I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds of mock strategy here, but I've always kind of thought that they were a little cheap. Now, look, I did it last year, but I really regret doing it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I got you. So, all right. So Sanders could slip, and we're not going to, in your mock, you won't have the exact team trading up for him. Do you think the team could be trading in for Dart? We haven't really talked Dart much.
Pittsburgh is kind of what I'm seeing there. I've seen a lot of New Orleans stuff, but again, same logic of Sanders there. I don't think it's going to be at 9 there.
Let me ask you about, because you mentioned the teams that need quarterbacks, and we talked the Saints as a team that may, like, sort of, there's teams that need quarterbacks right now. There's teams that could use a quarterback in the future, like the Rams. There's teams, though, that I think next year will almost certainly need a quarterback. Like, at least 50% of the time, they're going to need a quarterback next year. Saints are one of them. We've already had that conversation. But what about the Colts? Like, I don't know if they can, like, I don't know if they have the political capital to take a quarterback in the first round. But, like, if you did, it would make a lot of sense to be like, this isn't going to work. Like, it would be nice to have another body here, or an escape hatch, basically. And then the other team would be the Jets. I mean, would they be live to trade back in round 1 and take Milroe?
I think they're live to do that for sure. And I would lean toward Dart or Milroe for them as opposed to Sanders. I also, and my confidence level in that is pretty high. I think that they're one of these teams that view Milroe and Dart higher than Sanders potentially. I don't see Sanders to New York as a fit. To New York Jets, that is. The Saints, there's a lot of buzz. Now all the buzz is the Saints liking Sanders, but there's a lot of buzz that I'm getting where the Saints are into Jackson Dart. That I'm kind of buying.
Okay.
But again, I think it's a trade back in. So yes, to answer your question directly, I do think it's live for the Saints to trade back into the round and take Dart. I think that's more live than them taking Dart at 9 at this point.
Okay. Can I put you on the spot and ask you the order of the top 4 quarterbacks, how you see them going off?
Oh, man. Let's see. We're still 2 weeks out, and there's a lot to change here, honestly. I mean, I'm tweaking my mock every day. But, okay, so after Ward, right now, Right now, I have Dart being taken by Pittsburgh and then Sanders, and Milroe's not in there.
Okay.
But I know a lot of really, really smart people and a lot of very successful and accurate mockers that are mocking Milroe to 21 now because of this.
Wow.
So
Wow.
to me, I actually consider it pretty unpredictable in terms of quarterbacks 2 through 4. And that makes it
Wow.
pretty challenging because from a mocking standpoint, Pat, like quarterbacks are supposed to be the thing that like years that have a really good quarterback class are actually statistically they're when mock scores are up, right? Because quarterbacks are easy to mock. Easier to mock than other positions because you know when they're needed and you know when teams are going to do it. For example, last year's draft, like good quarterback class, most mockers, like 90% of mockers, got the first 3 picks right. And that's 3 hits right there just because it's quarterbacks. This year, we don't have that. So this year, you hear every year that the draft's unpredictable, but you're going to see scores. I've been doing this, judging scores for a while. You're going to see scores very down this year. Last year, the best mock in the world had 15 correct matches. I would be stunned if anyone is even hits 13 this year. So yeah, and it's because of the quarterbacks. You can't.
Yep.
That it makes it harder to. Those are supposed to be the kind of the corners of the puzzle. Like they're supposed to be easy. And now, not only do we not know kind of where they're going, we also don't know which order 2 through 4. So it makes kind of this puzzle that is the mock draft harder to kind of complete when you don't have those corner pieces.
So everything that you're saying is kind of horrible news for the Patriots, who would like Sheduer Sanders to go top 3 so that they can get one of the blue chip guys. And if not, they would like Sheduer to be very coveted once the blue chips are off the board so they can trade down, right? Like I think they'd be very happy to trade down to 6 or 7 or 9 for one of these teams to come up and get Sheduer. But that does not look like the world we're in. I mean, you're saying Sheduer might be the 3rd quarterback taken. He might even be the QB2 in the class, or some teams might have Milroe or Dart over him. So New England's sitting there for probably not going to be a lot of bites in terms of trading down. What do you think they do? Probably, I'm guessing not a skill player. I have heard people talk about Genty to them, which would be kind of insane from a team building perspective. Tet McMillan was mocked to them like early on. That seems to have cooled a lot. My read is that like they're probably looking at a tackle if they sit there, but what is your read?
No, I like your read. I think there's a lot of connections with Campbell there. Doug Marrone, actually, their offensive line coach there, and it's kind of a very famous offensive line coach. He's been around for a long time. He does a good job coaching offensive line. Former head coach, didn't do as good of a job at that, but he recruited Will Campbell, I believe. So there's connections there. I think he also recruited Kelvin Banks for what it's worth, but there are connections there. But also the Patriots offensive line, I chart injuries to the offensive line. How many missed starts do you have? And the Patriots, I believe I charted them as the offensive line that had the most missed starts among their starting 5.
How do you even figure out who the starters are supposed to be
in the
last
league?
Year?
Right. Yeah, they made, I want to say the numbers are, I would need to pull it up. I want to say out of a combined 85 possible starts, I want to say they had 50. It's really that low.
Wow.
And yeah, they made some moves in free agency, but they really haven't fixed the offensive line yet. So, and they just drafted a quarterback who they have to protect. So
yeah,
essentially offensive line seems kind of like a shoe-in here. The one dark horse I've heard is Jalen Walker here. He's getting a lot of steam right now. It's mainly not due to how good he is, which he is good. I'm not saying he's not. It's mainly due to his character. The teams that like New England and Jacksonville right now, and the Raiders that I keep hearing buzz about him going higher than Carolina, they really are all kind of putting an emphasis on character and winners and leadership and all those intangibles. And Walker apparently is like one of the guys in this draft class that exemplifies all of those qualities. So Albert Breer suggested it a couple times, and that's important, Pat, because Albert Breer suggested that Jalen Walker may be the pick at 4.
At 4.
It's important because he's such a national guy, but it's also important because he's kind of tight with Mike Vrabel, and he's a former Patriots beat. So he's kind of gotten in with a building, arguably. And if he's saying that they're still considering Walker, I'm kind of buying that. I don't think that's kind of a smokescreen. But yeah, ultimately, I haven't taken Campbell, and I think
Campbell's
so
also
than
another
Linderbaum.
kind of like high football IQ character
Yes,
guy, right?
that's true. I mean, he's also like that. His leadership, he's been starting since his freshman year in the LSU. That's actually very, very rare because of the competition, kind of the way that things work down here. So, yeah, he's. I don't know if. And also Mike Vrabel mentioned that he actually came out on the record and said, "Oh, we view Will Campbell as a tackle," and that's not necessarily how all teams view him because of the short span there. So.
Yeah.
I think the fact that Mike Vrabel did that, I think the fact that Mike Vrabel's an old school kind of run first coach, the fact that they have a young quarterback, a lot of signs point to Will Campbell there.
Okay, so if we then go like rounding out the rest of the top 10, let's say, there's been people have very frequently mocked Ashton Genty at 6 to the Raiders. You get Tyler Warren mocked to the Jets a lot. You'll see some. He'll kind of get mocked to a number of the teams in the back half of the top 10. McShay at one point had Omarion Hampton mocked to Chicago at 10. They would obviously be a Genty potential destination as well. Carolina gets some Tet McMillan. You will occasionally see like a Tet McMillan to the Jaguars. What are your thoughts on skill player landing spots in the rest of the top 10?
I'm not buying the McMillan to Carolina right now. I wouldn't be stunned if it happens. They need kind of a big-bodied receiver, I guess, even though they drafted Xavier last year. But they need and you have the coach Canales, Coach Mike Evans. I don't know. I don't really see Mike Evans and Ted as kind of the same player. But
he's almost closer to Godwin.
Yeah, and I think that the reason it's popularly mocked is because he's supposed to be receiver one, and Bryce Young just needs weapons. I actually think they're more live to draft Tyler Warren than they are McMillan, to be honest with you. I think McMillan's ceiling is kind of 12, if I had to guess, to Dallas. I think that's both of those receivers' ceilings. As far as skill positions, Ashton Genty, I think I'm going to end up either mocking him to the Raiders or the Bears. It's one of these situations where I'm actually more confident that the Bears would take Genty if available than I am that the Raiders would take him.
Yes.
However,
that makes sense.
However, like if Genty made it all the way down to 10, like I would
Bears
be pretty surprised based on everything they've done this offseason that he doesn't. But I just don't know if he's going to make it to 10. This is actually what happened with Odunze last year with the Bears. Most people thought that they would take Odunze if he made it that far, but they were concerned that he would.
Raiders, I'm pretty sure they did not think he would be there because no one thought the Penix was gone.
Well, there's a report that they tried to trade up with the Falcons, and the Falcons said no because they wanted Penix all of a sudden. So anyway, so
I mean, that's safe. They just drafted Caleb guys. They're not taking Penix.
Yeah. So the Genty, I think it's going to end up being the Raiders or the Bears. I think from a fantasy perspective, I mean, obviously, actually, I don't know. I don't know. Bears seem like a better landing spot, but then you have committee. Ben Johnson's always been a part of committee, but also the Raiders do kind of set up, at least for the future.
Both are awesome
Maybe not now because their offensive line's not there yet.
It's okay though. It's not a disaster.
Yeah, but
they're
with
kind
Chip
of in the
Kelly,
great middle. Yeah.
But Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll, it does kind of set up for a solid situation with Genty too. Yeah. You had that situation. I don't know if you saw, Pat, that the son of Spytech, the GM, Spytech mentioned on a podcast that basically the son was like, if you don't take Genty, you all deserve to get fired or something crazy like that.
So you basically, I'll know if you know what you're doing if you take Genty,
which I actually would kind of just totally dismiss. But then last year it happened with on national TV with Jaden Daniels when the Giants GM's son came out and said, "Oh well, if I were you, Dad, I would trade up for Jaden Daniels." And then the Giants GM was like, "I don't know about all that." And then now look what happened there. So
you got to listen to the Suns.
Yeah, exactly. So the Suns could be running the show. There might be pressure. Maybe that. No, but I get because of the run first nature of Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, you
Totally.
could see Genty there.
And they have
And
no, I mean, they have Mostert as a starting back. So, like, they will be
seriously,
taking it back.
yeah,
But
I
it's a
know.
deep class. They don't have to do it at 6, but Genty would make a lot of sense.
Right, and they could definitely do it in the second round. They could address offensive line first. I think their right tackle or one of their tackles has in a contract year, I believe, and they also kind of have a guard spot that's kind of open up for competition there if they want to take Campbell. Another player I kind of am eyeing for the Raiders is Mason Graham, though, because if Mason Graham's not
Okay.
taken by Jacksonville, maybe they go Carter. I really do think the Michigan connection with Spytech and Brady there maybe kind of lend some credence to maybe them surprising with like a Mason Graham or a Will Johnson there. But Genty's could probably go into the Raiders or the Bears. And as far as skill positions in the top 10, that could be it. I don't think McMillan's going on the top 10. And Tyler Warren could. I think his realistic ceiling is probably 9 and 10. The Saints are live for Tyler Warren.
So you don't think the Jets are live to take Warren?
I thought that initially, but now I think the Jets are going to kind of go in a different direction. They absolutely need a tight end. So from a needs-based perspective, Pat, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. However, just based on stuff that I've been reading lately, I think they're kind of moving, not that they were ever there. I'm kind of moving away from that speculation, if you will. I have Warren 4th on my board for the Jets. I have right now, like, I kind of give like a realistic short list on my website of like what we're expecting, not like a full board, because I'm not going to put like Carter and Hunter for all these teams, but kind of what we probably expect to be available. Right now, I have it as Mimbu, Campbell, Graham, Warren, and Banks. But lately, I've been reading that they view Mimbu and Banks very equally, if not Banks even higher. And that, I don't know. I think they view all those 5 players very similarly. I would probably put Graham. I'd probably put Warren last among those 5. I'll just say that. Yeah, for the Jets.
I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's been some buzz. Like I was reading an article by Nate Tice where he's very high on Colston Loveland, and was kind of making the case that Loveland might actually be long term more of the traditional tight end, where like Warren you can kind of move him around more, which goes against the more common framing, which is like Loveland's more of the move tight end and Warren's kind of the more traditional guy. And it's part of like a little bit of buzz that I felt that maybe not that Loveland's tight end 1, but that it's very close.
Some teams have his tight end 1. That's a fact.
Okay, and so that would certainly hurt Warren's chances, I would think, of going top 10, and not that he's necessarily going to fall in the draft, but it would increase the odds that he, like, let's say, slips to like 14 to the Colts or something. I would think.
The Colts are his floor. I mean, I mentioned on a live stream the other day, someone asked me like, what picks are you most confident in if a player like falls later than expected? And actually, my first 2 answers were Genty to the Bears if he falls past the Raiders, and Tyler Warren to the Colts. So I think that's a match that makes a lot. You had the Colts GM literally say, like very candid response. He said, we need a game changer at tight end. Like we need one. The Colts are a team that typically drafts kind of high RAS athletes there. What I'm a little concerned about there though, whereas Loveland might be perceived as a better receiving athlete, I'm a little concerned that Dallas puts such an emphasis on relative athletic score and stuff like that. I'm a little concerned that Loveland didn't test because of his shoulder injury. And I'm wondering if he's going to slide a little due to medical. I think some teams might have him medically flagged. So from that perspective, I'm a little concerned.
For the shoulder?
Yeah. And I'm just kind of thinking back. I like to kind of compare situations to previous years. Colston Loveland, I'm not saying they're the same guy on film, but in terms of their strengths and in terms of what they bring to a team, he reminds me of Kincaid coming out, where Kincaid was ranked 15th overall on Jeremiah's board. And teams just don't draft tight ends as high as I guess the media or the fans tend to think that they do. So like, for example, even Bowers last year, Bowers is clearly a superior prospect to Warren and Loveland, but even he fell to 13. Now, I'm sure teams regret that. I'm not saying he wouldn't be drafted higher now, but I think teams don't value that position as much as they do other positions, and it causes them to slide. Warren's also kind of an older prospect as well. And that I think Colson's Loveland is a year younger than he is. So that might cause Warren maybe to slide to 14.
And a fifth-year player versus a third-year player too. I think
Right.
it's easier to see how Loveland.
Yeah.
It's not hard to think that he has the higher ceiling.
I do think Warren's going to go first, though. I do. I want to make that clear.
Okay.
I think that there are teams that value Loveland, that have Loveland higher on their boards, but I don't see those as teams that are actually going to do it, I guess, like as in they're going to take another position. So the teams we were talking about skill positions, Saints, Bears, and Colts are probably my three most likely Warren teams. And in terms of Loveland, landing spots are probably Seattle. I'm going to put the Colts in there too. I don't know how they're going to view him medically. I think the Colts probably wish that he had some testing to go by. But I'm going to put the Colts in there, but that's kind of like a ceiling there. Seattle is a team that I really do think is genuinely interested in Loveland. And then his floor, I'm going to say, is 22. And that's kind of right around where Kincaid actually went later than Colston does. And then Loveland would go if he went to 22 with Jim Harbaugh there. And that would be kind of an obvious fit because tight end is such a premium spot in that offense. Harbaugh's always utilized it, and the Michigan connection. So
do you think that Warren not testing will cause any issues for the Colts?
I know that's kind of hypocritical to say, but from what I'm look, it's not me kind of making these evaluations. I'm just mocking based on what I'm hearing, what I'm reading. And to me, all indications are the Colts would take Warren at 14 if he is available. It was reported last year that the Colts were really a team that was high on Bowers. Now, not high enough to move up for him, but to be fair to the Colts,
Thank you for not doing that, 15, Colts.
Yeah, to be fair to them, I don't think that the Colts thought that the Raiders were going to take. I don't think anyone thought the Raiders were going to take Bowers. That was one of the most surprising.
I don't think the Raiders thought the Raiders. I think they wanted a quarterback.
I think they wanted Penix. Yeah, and I think everyone was kind of. That's when a lot of mock drafts and when the NFL draft, in my opinion, kind of went, I don't want to say off the rails, but because it was still okay, but it kind of surprised a lot of people, I guess.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the Colts, I'm hoping they don't get either Loveland or Warren because that's just such a, I have a lot of best ball teams already, and that's not a fun landing spot. Yeah, it's a tough one, but I could definitely see them doing that. And yeah, Loveland. So you said you think the floor for Loveland is 22 to the Chargers?
I'd be a little bit surprised if Harbaugh passed on Loveland. Yeah. If they did, it probably would have to be medicals because I think Harbaugh respects him as a player. But then you're getting to I do what's called a realistic floor when I talk about this stuff in like absolute floor, if you will. Like when I say realistic, I mean like what I kind of expect to happen. But if I had to really say, okay, if the Chargers don't, I really have a hard time seeing the Rams pass on at 26. I can't imagine McVay who has been wanting a tight end for years. And by the way, speaking of Brock Bowers speculation, the Rams, Jordan Rodriguez and others literally reported on draft day they were trying to trade up for Bowers and no team would accept their offer. So you have evidence of them trying to get a move tight end last year. They didn't get one. Higbee's a year older. And then you have Jordan Rodriguez. We talked about Nick Underhill being a reliable beat writer in terms of draft interest here. Jordan Rodriguez, she literally said from last year, months before the draft, hey, the Rams are really going to focus on defensive line this offseason. Hint, hint, they want pass rushers. And then they end up picking Jared Verse. And this year, when she was pressed on what positions the Rams are going to focus on, she said receiver, tight end, and right tackle. And she made a little caveat. She said, this is right tackle and tight end, despite the fact that they haven't signed in Higbee. And the reason is I believe both are in contract years. And
interesting.
She mentioned receiver first, but that was prior to Devontae Adams. So let's just say receiver is not the priority now. Tight end was the second thing she mentioned, literally despite Higbee. Yeah, I don't think if either Warren or Loveland are somehow available to the Rams, I would expect one of them to be the selection.
Yeah, she was all over the Kyron Williams
Right.
being his breakout year, kind of the buzz there, and Puka. So yeah, I highly recommend paying attention to what she has to say.
Yeah.
Let's talk the running backs in round one. We mentioned
Sure.
Genty, Hampton. Where do you think his ceiling and floor are?
So my answer is going to be different than almost every mocker out there, I guess. I think his ceiling is 20. And I know everyone is
Wow.
saying, yeah, I know everyone, a lot of people,
I gotta
please keep
scroll
in
down for the
mind
floor then.
yeah, please keep in mind for any viewers out there, that is a very kind of an aggressively late stance, because most people are saying that the ceiling is the Chicago at 10 or Dallas at 12. They definitely need running back there. Based on my research, if we're talking about Chicago, I think they are really, really Eric Bieniemy is the running backs coach there now. And I think that kind of reeks as like we are desperate for running back, but Eric Bieniemy is absolutely like on record prioritizing pass protection. And the running back that I've heard that they like a lot, and that makes a lot of logical sense, is Travion Henderson. Now, I don't think it makes sense at 10, but I think it's more of like a round 2 target or maybe even a trade up target. I don't think Hampton is the guy in Chicago. And this is probably going to be a soundbite that just goes back in my face here. But I'm actually going to double down. And Mel Kiper mocked this 3 times in a row, which actually gives me pause because he got the Cowboys picked right last year with Guyton. But I don't think Dallas is a Hampton team either. They just have too many other needs. And I don't know, they kind of did address a running back a little bit. And not that I like him touting the guys that they added, saying like, oh, they have a great running back room, but they did make some moves. And I don't
That's true. That's a factual statement.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a factual statement. Anyway, but we had all these beat writers from Dallas say, Pat, like, hey, I really don't think running back's the direction here. And that's actually been the sentiment for months.
Okay.
The only people who are disagreeing are actually random mockers who are saying, hey, Genty goes to the Raiders or the Bears, and that means, hey, what's the next team that needs running back? Hampton's the next running back. So I'm not going to say that I'd be shocked, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to throw my popcorn or drop my coffee if the Bears or the Cowboys take Hampton. I just personally don't have
Got it.
So I see a ceiling of 20, and I really we talk about picks that I'm kind of most confident in right now. And right now, 2 weeks out, Pat, that just means like which picks am I going to struggle to move off by the time 14 days rolls around in my final mock, which teams are it's going to take a lot of reports or rumors or intel for me to move off these picks. Hampton to Denver is one that I've literally had mock there since my initial mock in February. If anything, throughout this last, 40 or days or whatever it's been more substantiated. Ben Albright has substantiated it. They haven't addressed the running back room in free agency at all. Sean Payton has been a guy who's always prioritized the running game, throwing passes to running backs and that kind of stuff. It's a huge need in Denver. If you look at their whole roster.
And they actually have the offensive line to support a running back.
Yeah.
And they got
the
quarterback. I'm not a big take a running back in the first round guy at all, but that's a spot where you would say, having a guy like Hampton would actually move the needle in some important ways, and as you're trying to help the development of a second-year quarterback.
The analogy that I heard on Twitter, and it's actually some random, I hate to just quote a random Twitter use, but I really, really, really liked it a lot, and I've used it since, is the running back's kind of pouring gasoline on the fire. You have to kind of start the fire first, and you kind of have to, put the sticks there, put the logs there, kind of build it up with the offensive line, the quarterback, and then you have the fire going, and then the running back's kind of the finishing touch that makes this fire, go boom. And that's kind of what the Eagles did with Barkley. And that's kind of what the Ravens did with Derrick Henry. So yes, from that perspective, it also makes sense. Denver going Hampton. The other team I see, since we want to focus on skill positions, is the Steelers. And what's interesting from a mocking perspective is that they're back-to-back. I've heard the Steelers really like Omari and Hampton. And that one makes sense because, again, all they have is Jalen Warren. And you also have a coordinator there, Arthur Smith, who is I mean, all he wants to do is run the ball.
Yeah.
So yeah, 20 and 21. I hate to answer your question like, oh, his ceiling's 20 and his floor is 21.
Floor's 21.
Yeah, but I'm not really. I guess I don't want to like say it like that. But in terms of like my final mock, and this is that's kind of what I specialize on is where am I going to mock these two players? It's probably going to be either 20 or 21. So from a mocking standpoint, I see it as 20 and 21. From a reality standpoint, yeah, the Steelers could go quarterback. Maybe Denver goes Derek Harmon, who I know that they're high on. And yeah, maybe Hampton falls to the early second round or whatever. But yeah, but my money would be on the Broncos taking Hampton if he is available.
Let me ask you about like if Hampton were to fall, or maybe if we see a third running back go in the first round, teams that could use a boost to the running back room, even if it's not like a pressing need. The Vikings, you could make an argument for the Texans and the Rams. The Ravens could use a long-term answer, with Henry. He's defied Father Time for a decade, but yeah, the Commanders. Yeah, the Commanders actually like straight up need a running back.
Yes.
The Bills seem to be at odds with James Cook over this contract stuff, and then the Chiefs. I mean, maybe they're scarred by the CEH pick, but they certainly could use a boost to the running back room. So
yeah,
those teams are interesting, I think, not just from round one, but as we talk about the depth of this running back class, maybe, and certainly in almost every case, much more likely to take a running back outside of round one than in round one. But just thoughts on those teams being paired with running backs.
Yeah, Commanders. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I got excited about it because I do think that that's, if we're looking at an actual floor for maybe Hampton, that's probably a more realistic floor if it's not going to be 20 or 21.
Makes sense.
Yeah, they desperately need a running back there. And Hampton seems kind of like a good fit on the read options with Jaden Daniels there. That seems pretty lethal, honestly. And the Commanders are a team that they're solid at a lot of positions, but they don't have a lot of glaring, other than I would argue edge rusher. They don't have a lot of absolute glaring needs because they signed some free agents. They traded for Debo to kind of at least do a 1-year rental and wide receiver. So the Commanders are probably the team that's most glaring to me that, hey, we need a running back. I would have said Minnesota, Pat, but I think they're pretty content with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason to the point where if they did add a third running back at this point, at that point, it's really kind of a luxury at that point. I don't think
Day 3 type stuff.
Luxury. Yeah, I think it's more of like a depth situation. I know Aaron Jones is fragile and he's getting old, but to me, I think the Vikings are going to draft someone who's going to try to either really, really help, their secondary, which, Barron maybe, or offensive line. They have a left guard spot open. So that's also.
They also don't have a second round pick, so
that would be a very luxury pick there.
First round running back would be almost insane by them, but maybe they would trade down or something.
As far as the Chiefs go, I like that suggestion by you. I think the CEH thing is definitely maybe they wouldn't do it because I think it was pick 32 and now they're sitting at 31. But Henderson is someone that I think that they would like there. The Chiefs absolutely like. First and foremost, they need to protect Mahomes. I mean, that's literally why they lost the Super Bowl. I mean, they probably would have lost even they got crushed, but that was a big reason why they lost the Super Bowl.
Didn't know.
And so if it's not offensive linemen, I'm thinking they're going to want a running back who can pass protect. And maybe Henderson, let's say Hampton does go 20 or 21 and Genty goes in the top 10. And maybe I think Henderson could be like a sleeper to sneak into round 1 at Kansas City. Albright, for what it's worth, Pat, Albright actually, and he's a Denver guy, national reporter, but he mainly he also covers. I trust him with Broncos stuff for sure. He mentioned. I actually asked him directly, "Hey, are they interested in Henderson in round 1?" And he actually just said, "Yeah." So that could be kind of but I do want to make the caveat. It was kind of my question was kind of a response to if Hampton is gone.
Right.
So he seemed to suggest that if Hampton is gone, Derek Harmon and Travion Henderson are names to watch. Harmon's a defensive tackle, so it's kind of irrelevant for this conversation. But Henderson, I mean, I think he could go as high as 21. But realistically, I think he's probably going to land in the early second round.
Okay, let's go to wide receiver.
Sure.
We've seen some real movement from the beginning of the of the pre-draft process to now in terms of the names that we're expecting, kind of, but I guess the order and sort of the top names have kind of all shuffled around. Like Ted McMillan, if we leave Travis Hunter, as kind of his own thing, Ted McMillan was the wide receiver one heading into the pre-draft process, but that's not necessarily the case now, or not. It's not clear cut. It could be Matthew Golden, it sounds like. But those two are probably the top two from my read. And then you have Emeka Ibuka. You've got Luther Burden. You also have Jaden Higgins making like a huge run up into the early second, it looks like. He probably stops there, but would be curious on your thoughts if he or maybe even someone else could sneak into round one. But ultimately, I guess let's start at the top. Like, who do you think is the full time, definitely going to play wide receiver one to go off the board, and where do you think that happens?
I've been so interested in this conversation for like a month now, because it's such a extreme pivot point of a mock draft, not necessarily getting the picks right, but because if you mess up Dallas in receiver one, which is likely going to be a receiver, it's not for sure. They have other defensive needs. But if Golden or Tet goes to Dallas, it's such an extreme situation because I don't think the next receiver is going to go until the 20s. And that's a pretty massive, substantial gap between two players that I think most teams have very similarly graded. In reality, I think that these receivers are about the same quality as the receivers we saw 2 years ago. That was the Zay Flowers and the Jordan Addison and the
JSN.
JSN group, where they all went back to back to back to back.
And Quentin Johnston was in that group too.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and they all went in the late teens, early 20s. I think it was picks 20 to 23, if I'm not mistaken. But
That's
anyway,
right. Yeah.
These players are more along those lines from everything I've gathered. All right.
Yep.
And these are these are teams' opinion, not my personal opinion. My personal opinion about these players is irrelevant, right? When it terms mocking the draft, because I'm not making the picks.
Right.
Everything I've read about teams, they see them more in that range. The problem is that receivers getting paid a lot, and some teams just really, really need a wide receiver. And one of those teams is the Dallas Cowboys. If there are varying opinions on whether Dallas prefers Tet, kind of a big-bodied like T. Higgins-like receiver, or they prefer Matthew Golden, who's he ran a 4.29. He's faster. He doesn't necessarily play that fast from what I understand, but Golden is seen as a better complement to CeeDee Lamb, but Ted is seen as going to be the receiver one on most teams' boards. So a lot of people in Dallas are connecting Golden to Dallas, but I've also seen like Brian Brodus, who's got an in on the Cowboys, saying, no, I think it's going to be Tet there. So you're seeing mockers split.
You also have Golden went to Houston and then Texas. And I feel like with the Cowboys, that could matter.
Yeah, if they want star power there, right?
Yeah.
So then that would be maybe a tiebreaker of sorts. They have they have had both in the building for a top 30 visit, which is very, very relevant because the Cowboys, like the Steelers, are one of these handful of teams that typically meets with their eventual round one pick. So the fact that they both bet kind of signals genuine interest. I do think one of them is going to end up there as of now. I don't know which one's going to be. And I know that's not very helpful, but what I'm very confident in is maybe this help with betting or whatever, is that whichever one does not get taken, I'm predicting a fall for the other one, because you're seeing a lot of teams, and you have the board up right now. Miami, no receiver there. Colts, no receiver. Atlanta, no receiver. Arizona, no receiver. Maybe Arizona, but I doubt it. Cincinnati is not going to take a receiver. Seattle, I don't know. They just signed Kupp. They're going to a run-first offense. They need a receiver, kind of, but I don't know. Tampa Bay, probably not. Denver, Albright says no. Pittsburgh, they have met with Matthew Golden, so I could see that there. And we're in the 20s. We're in the 20s, Pat. Like which receiver? Where are we going to go So
Chargers would be pretty interesting. I mean, they could
both
use
of them.
a guy like Tet, that
Yes.
outside
Either
receiver
one,
would
actually, I could see the Chargers taking. Green Bay,
totally.
Golden, interestingly, does not match Green Bay's like measurables that they're so strict on in their
Mm.
athleticism and measurables and that all that kind of stuff. They're
Golden
very
doesn't.
strict on that.
What is Golden missing?
I'm not sure. So Peter Bukowski does a really, really good job of kind of analyzing Packer types, he calls them. And
Okay.
Golden was not on list. I think he's too slight of stature. I think he's
Oh,
only
okay. That makes
5'11". I think
sense.
he's too light. Where the Packers,
Okay.
first of all, the Packers never pick receiver in round one. But if they
Right.
do, which I could see it this year, like they were the only team, I think it was the only team that they went to Tet's pro day. It was the only team where the GM went there. So I
He
could
also
see them
didn't
taking
jump,
Tet. Yeah.
so maybe,
So
yeah.
I could see them taking Tet there, not Golden. But yeah, so anyway, my point is you're in the 20s now where you have kind of a
Yep.
disparity here.
Yep.
What if Dallas doesn't take receiver and they take a defender there? Then these receivers end up landing just like 2023, where these receivers probably should land. But yeah, it's a very interesting situation there. My stances are kind of, I'm 50-50. I'm torn. I change it like every day on whether it's going to be Tet or Golden to Dallas. But my stance is kind of like, hey, Green Bay could be the next slot for Tet and or McMillan, I should say. And maybe the Chargers in Pittsburgh, that area could be the next spot for Golden, but not Green Bay. So it's kind of like getting a little wonky here on historical kind of trends. But yeah, I know that's a complicated answer to the question, but that's kind
What
of
do you
my.
think about Houston or the Commanders? Those would be fun spots.
I thought Houston initially, but Lance Zierlein is kind of the guy for Houston there. And it seems like it's going to be O-line
Okay.
there.
That
The
makes a ton
one
of
player
sense.
he mentioned as consideration for Houston that wasn't offensive line was Derek Harmon. I found that pretty interesting. You're seeing a lot of buzz about Derek Harmon right now, or at least I am. A lot of teams in the 20s really like Derek Harmon. But anyway, Houston, they need a receiver, but I think they need offensive line more. So they're in a situation, they're in a spot where, assuming that Golden and Tet are gone, which I actually don't think we should assume, honestly, but assuming that they are, I think most mocks will have them gone at that point. They're in a spot where rather than taking like Egbuka or something like that, they're in a spot where offensive line makes more sense because there's going to be bodies there in that range for
Yeah.
sure.
So then what do you think about Ibuka and Burden? If Golden or Tet or both, I guess probably just one, like you're saying with Dallas, is falling, where are we talking about the other receiver? I mean, Burden at one point was kind of in the Golden spot. Like you could take old mocks and just like sub out Burden and put in Golden. It's like,
Yeah.
but he's been kind of passed. And Ibuka was, kind of seeming like a lock for round one early, but now it seems like maybe one of him or Burden would be most likely to fall out of round one. What do you think about that?
I think both of them could fall out of round one, honestly. And
Okay.
it's not necessarily due to their talent at all. It's mainly due to just need. If you look at all these other teams in the 20s, for example, the Rams probably are not going to go receiver. I think they could go Golden because it brings something different to the table. But
Yep.
Baltimore has invested a lot in receiver and their run first there. The Lions, I just think they have to go defense. The Commanders, maybe running game or defense. Buffalo has other needs. They invested in receiver and free agency as well. Kansas City just picked Xavier Worthy last year near this spot. And Philadelphia, maybe if A.J. Brown's traded, I could see that being a play. But these are a lot of teams where wide receivers just simply not one of their top three needs. Not to say they couldn't benefit from that, Pat. Like if you put Egbuka on a lot of these teams, I'm sure he's fine. However, most teams in round one, in my experience, draft based on need. Like it is very rare. It happens about 4 times each year since I've been tracking this, where about 4 or 5 times each year that a team doesn't take like a top 4 need that I'll list for them. And receivers just not one of these, they could be useful, but they're not one of these top needs. In round one, teams typically draft by need. Now, Burden is interesting because he was supposed to be a top 15 pick. However, Daniel Jeremiah's first mock was the kind of the turning point of, whoa, he didn't include him. right? Well, that's a little odd. And someone like Daniel Jeremiah wouldn't just forget how talented he is. There must be something there. And it turns out that there is. It turns out there's a lot of character issues. Bob McGinn's scouting report did a good job kind of spelling out those, however trivial they seem. It sounds like this guy is, I'm going to put it the way that I was listening to a podcast the other day. I'm going to try to be diplomatic about it and try to be, I guess, correct about it. That because I don't know these guys personally, and these are young guys. The way that it's been described to me is he is difficult to coach, and he's more about like the new trend of receivers or NIL players who are more focused on themselves as opposed to team oriented. And also teams, from what I understand, had a tough time getting Burden to, I guess, do things that aren't catching the football, as in running a clear out route for another receiver to get open, like on the design, or blocking, if you will. And again, I'm not a college scout. These are not my personal takes, but they are the takes of the people that I'm reading about who, maybe
that are talking to the decision makers that are actually going to draft these guys.
And if Daniel Jeremiah and McShay don't have Burden in the first round, then and guys like big media guys like that, that's irrelevant. Like that's very, very important. So you're seeing character red flags pop up with like Walter Nolan.
It sounds like at the very least we're going to get some "the enemy speaks kindly and holds a knife" tweets from Luther Burden. That seems
probably so. And Daniel Jeremiah can't come out and say, "Oh yeah, this guy's got character red flags all over him." But he's just, the way he speaks to us, I guess, as people who follow his mocks, is he just doesn't include him in round one. And then that causes speculation. And then, the scouting reports on McGinn and others have substantiated these reports. So I don't think Burden's going to go in round one. Maybe a team with like a luxury pick, like the Eagles, where they already have A.J. Brown. They already have leadership. They just won a Super Bowl, and they already have a good locker room. Maybe they could be the one to just kind of sneak him in there. Especially because A.J. Brown, rumored to be unhappy as himself, but maybe they need a receiver more than we think. But I could see it. I'm not saying he definitely won't go in round one, but it's not something I'm mocking right now. And as far as Egbuka, he has got the opposite issue. It's everyone thinks Burden could be supremely talented and useful. Egbuka, teams are more concerned about his ceiling. What is he going to be? And it's actually, ironically, coincidentally, at least, it's the opposite personality-wise. Egbuka, as far as from what I understand, raving reviews of his personality and his character and his leadership. So if Egbuka does sneak in round one and he ends up being a slot receiver, teams typically don't take slot receivers in round one. It's probably because of his personality, whereas Burden, it's kind of the opposite. If he slides out of round one, it's because of his bad personality, right? So, Egbuka's hard to slot though, Pat. Like he is tough to slot. I want to include him in my round one mock because of the great reports on the interviews and because he came from OSU, but I don't know where to put him. Right now I have him with the Eagles, but that's just me trying to really fit him in there and get some points for like some of these.
That's kind of why I asked about Houston, because Houston, you get, the Ohio State Stroud connection. They could use more weapons. I mean, they have like Christian Kirk, but
at this point, I think that's the ceiling. But I think that they're going to, based on Zerline's account, to that point, Pat, Zerline initially mocked Egbuka to Houston. That was his first mock. And that, I was like, okay, well, that makes logical sense. But since then, that was before they kind of retooled their whole O-line, and he's pretty plugged in there. So they kind of, started over on the offensive line. I could see Egbuka going there if they feel like enough free agency moves and trades fix their offensive line enough. But I don't know. I'm kind of going O-line there. And if that happens, who's going to take Egbuka? It's a tough slotting situation. From a mocking perspective, it's like, go ahead.
Well, I mean, you talk about trades into the back half of round one. You could always project it. Like if I do one of these, I'll probably have Dallas trade back in round one and take Matthew Golden after taking Ted at 12. And that way I'll definitely get a hit there.
That's actually a great, you're using my words against me. I mean, that's a good strategy right there. I'll have to think maybe I reconsider my stance on trades there, but because it does look like it's going to be between those two picks.
And then, I mean, but you could see a team trading back in for one of the other guys, assuming Golden is and Ted are gone. Maybe it's a team that's not listed on this list here, right? That comes back in for Ibuka or something.
Yeah, Egbuka's not really a player that is typically traded up
Because of the
for, and I
ceiling
don't.
concerns.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't mean that in
that
like a
makes sense.
slight, but yeah, it's just exactly what you said.
Yeah. No, that actually makes a ton of sense. He and Burden feel kind of like the first pick of round 2 in certain ways.
I feel that way right now too. Although I will say the over under right now for Ibuka is I think 28.5, and I think at some spots 29.5. So Vegas does see him going in round 1 at some point, but again, he's just hard to slot. I don't know if he's going to make my final mock. I just need kind of more
Okay.
intel on that.
So then how many, and I didn't ask you how many running backs. How many wide receivers do
Two
you
for
think go on round?
If I had to, pick right now, 2 for each is my best bet
Okay.
there.
Okay.
However, I wouldn't be shocked if Egbuka or Trayvon Henderson, the running back, kind of sneak in there. But I've actually personally bet on under 2.5 receivers because that's actually a lot of the juice was on the over. So I think that's a pretty I don't know where the number is right now. I did that like 2 weeks ago when I kind of figured that Ibuka would be a fringe player. I'm like really legit 50-50 on whether he makes the top 32. So to me, that seems like a pretty decent bet if the juice is on the
Have you
over.
considered anyone else being in the first round wide receiver discussion, or is it kind of
It'd
end
probably
with
be
Burden?
Burden, but maybe a team is cool with him personality wise. But I don't. If you're referring to like Higgins, I'm not really
Higgins, yeah.
considering him as an option
Okay.
here.
I figured you weren't, but he's had such a rise from
He
like,
has.
he's in the round 2, round 3, round 2 mix to like it seems like he's kind of locked in round 2 now.
I think so.
Yeah, and you never know how high that ends up becoming. All right, I think we should leave it there. But before we go, can I get like a little bit of insight into what your like media consumption habits are right now? Like, I feel like I'm trying my best to kind of stay up with the mock drafts and the the various interviews and stuff, but I'm sure you have taken this to another level. So can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah, the answer is everything. I'd leave everything. I put everything on the table. I mean, I'm on Reddit forums. That's about as low as it gets, obviously.
Are
I'm
you on
like
the
on Reddit,
team, like the team
like
pages?
individual team Reddit forums to
Oh
see
my-
not to see like what the fans want, because that's not
right,
relevant. But
right.
like every now and then, even like, shout out to Reddit, I guess, but every now and then a commenter will be like, oh, well, I am a Bengals fan, and I know for a fact that they don't draft any defensive linemen unless their arms are longer than
Uh-huh.
36 inches or whatever it is. And then I'll kind of verify that. I'll be like, hey, Reddit bro, 420 is onto something right there. And so that kind of all right, that's like as low as it gets, right? But as high as it gets, look, I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, I may be more accurate than like McShay and Jeremiah, but I'm not going to sit here and say I know more than they do. No, I'm actually using their mocks to guide mine.
Right.
There's a lot of people in the industry that I respect that are way more plugged in. I'm not even plugged in at all. Where they're plugged in, where I'm like, okay, that's very important. I just have big documents where I'm recording kind of coach speak that I see, interviews from GMs. Like there's one in Jacksonville, for example, that I just kind of talked about, where it's like he said, we want to make sure our draft picks are intangibly rich and that they elevate the ecosystem. So what I'll do in my big draft document is I'll write that down. And that basically to me means, hey, they're not taking anyone at pick 5 unless their character is like off the charts awesome. So basically I have a whole Excel
So Jalen
document.
Carter, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And Will Campbell as well. So I have a document with just like all of this stuff there. And then I mentioned throughout this episode, which I have a chart of like beat writers that have been reliable in the past. So I'm looking at the answer to your question is honestly everything, like from the bottoms of Reddit team forums to the top, which is like Daniel Jeremiah and Peter Schrager's mocks and McShay and all these guys. And then I'm also, just kind of looking everywhere. Twitter is the spot, right? Where you're kind of finding stuff, and part of kind of mocking the draft is figuring out which reports kind of don't pass the sniff test and are smoke screens and BS, and which reports like seem like they're accurate. So yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of podcasts to listen to, a lot of Reddit posts to read. I'll let you get to it. Really appreciate the time. This was awesome. Ton of insight here. Let people know where they can check out all your stuff.
Yeah, fantasylawguy.com. I have an evolving mock draft. So I literally change it based on like what I'm hearing and reading throughout the day. And before I submit my final one, obviously, but it's fantasylawguy.com. There you can also find, I haven't written my full-on player descriptions yet, but they will be posted there. You can look at my previous mocks, my accuracy scores against all the experts. I think you'll be satisfied with that kind of stuff. I chart all this stuff. And then you also, I also put player ranges on there right now. Like, for example, like we talked about the receivers, 12 to 23 for like Tet, for example. So that's kind of helpful if you're into more like betting the draft as opposed to like fantasy football or mocking the draft. Like, but yeah, so if you're into that kind of stuff. Also, I post on Twitter literally just from, I'll be like radio silent. I play DFS and I love DFS. I'll be radio silent from like literally for months of the year. And then once February rolls around, okay, full steam ahead from February to April, fantasy law guy. Like I'm tweeting every day about the draft, and I'll do my own live streams there as well. So thank you so much, Pat, for giving me a platform. I know you're into DFS as well. So that's kind of awesome. I've heard you in the DFS space. You're one of the top guys there, and I have a lot of respect for you and really, really appreciate you having me on today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. No, this has been a pleasure. Everyone check out Fantasy Law Guy, Nick's handle on Twitter. Check out, you said fantasylawguy.com?
Yeah, that's the website, fantasylawguy.com, at Fantasy Law Guy on Twitter.
All right. Thanks again, Nick. See you guys later. I'll be back on later in the week streaming some drafts, have some more interviews and podcast episodes in the weeks coming up to the draft. It's just around the corner. Thanks for watching. See you later.